I came for the robot wars, but stayed for the 100 square foot miniature D-Day invasion. Open Sauce Live 2023 happened just this month, and I was lucky enough to attend, and I want to tell you all about it. I'm Angela, you're watching Hobby Night, now let's get to this. You might remember that last year I went to Silicon, a convention put on by Adam Savage that was really focused on makers, and I thought it was absolutely amazing. I made a video about it, but unfortunately, this year Silicon got canceled. And I don't know if Open Sauce Live was a direct response to Silicon getting canceled, but I'm really glad that they took its place in the time slot of when that would have originally been happening for me, because I absolutely loved Open Sauce Live 2023. I originally found out about it through perusing Instagram. I was looking on there and I saw a post from Evan and Caitlin, two content creators that I absolutely love. They do a lot of really amazing resin projects, and they have an adorable cat, which I can completely relate to. And so I saw that they were going to something called Open Sauce Live. I looked into what it might be, and my mind was blown when I went to the website and looked at the guest list for this convention. It had so many science and maker YouTubers that I recognize and actively watch that I was like, I have to go to this thing. It's happening locally. I don't care what the Chaos Cultist says. I am buying us tickets to this because Mark Rober's gonna be there. Adam Savage was there. It was being put on by William Osman. The Backyard Scientist was there. Obviously, Evan and Caitlin were there. Nerdforge went to it. There was an entire giant list of content creators that were all going to be at this. And I just was like, I have to. I love everything that these people do, and I want to see what they're going to be doing at Pier 35 in SF, which seemed like a really strange location for it, but it actually ended up being really, really cool. So let's actually talk about what happened at Open Sauce Live. Thankfully, because we're local, we were able to just drive to the nearest BART station that was directly across from the bay, take that BART across, and then we walked the remainder of the way towards Pier 35 to get to the event. And honestly, outside of it being a little bit chilly on the pier itself, it was a perfectly pleasant travel, and I have zero complaints. And thankfully, we also didn't have to deal with like flights or hotels or anything like that, which some people who were coming to this thing did, and I feel for you because SF ain't a cheap city. But for us, it wasn't so bad. Once we got there, we did have to wait in line for about 30 minutes to 45 minutes before we were able to get in once the event actually started, which all things considered was not that bad of a line. I've heard tales of some people at like Comic-Cons and other places where it took them like 2 to 3 hours just to get into the building, let alone having to stand in lines to get into some of the events they wanted to do. And thankfully, that did not happen here. I did hear people complaining about the line, but I really don't think it was that big of a deal. I do kind of feel bad for Osman because he was the one who put on this event, because his metal detectors that he had rented did not work the entire time. Security had such a struggle, and I do actually think that is what slowed the line down a little bit. So provided they can correct that next year and hopefully get a refund on those faulty machines, they should be fine. It should be absolutely fine next year. But lessons to be learned. Outside of that though, getting in and getting to the event was absolutely fine. And the event itself was gigantic. It was in a massive pier. So Pier 35 is huge. They didn't even use the entire space. And the only actual other complaint that I have about the event was specifically due to sound. They really had some sound problems, and the main stage especially, which was basically impossible to get to. So if you wanted to go to any of the main stage events, unless you were already sitting in like the 500 seats that they had around it, you probably weren't going to be able to see much, and you definitely weren't going to be able to hear much, because apparently outside of the first 2 rows in near the main stage, you just couldn't hear anything, which is why we tried to see some of the main stage stuff, but eventually just gave up because we were so far back. It was we just couldn't hear anything. We couldn't see anything. And that was like the one major issue, I guess, that I had with it. If you had come to this convention to specifically see some of the content creators and hadn't bought the premium pass, and so the only other place to really see them was the main stage, it might have been a bad experience. But for me, that's not what I was there for. I was there for the activities and all of the science. While it might have sucked that we weren't able to get to the main stage for any of those events, There was tons to do at this convention. As I said, it was a science fair. We got to see a bunch of really cool machines doing a variety of different things. There was a machine that could help you put on and take off rubber gloves, which was really cool, and I can totally see being valuable to nurses. And seeing it actually function was just mind-boggling. There was also a completely disassembled Game Boy Color that was still playable, and I thought that was really, really cool because Game Boy Color was one of those handheld consoles that I had as a kid, and so just like seeing one broke apart, seeing all the various electronic pieces, but all of it still functioning while spread out on this board was just awesome. There was also this one booth that I absolutely loved, and I have to talk to you guys about it. It was called Waste World, and this guy, Brett, I believe his name was just amazing. He takes old RC cars and various other toys and he converts them into mobile death machines. Not actually, but some of them actually do have legitimate weapons on them, including one that had a flamethrower on it. And you have no idea how much I wish he could have demoed the flamethrower. I don't think he could. I don't think it would have been possible. I don't even know if it was hooked up properly, but it sounded amazing. But he like basically kit bashed all of these things together, created these RC cars that were completely drivable, had some functioning weapons on them, kind of like Robot Wars, but like still looking more like toys. And they just were so cool. The entire time I was talking with him and looking at all of his stuff, I just wanted him to build me from scratch an entire orc army that could move. I wanted to RC car a giant orc titan around or something like, and I think he could probably build it for me, and I really should have asked him about it, but I didn't. I didn't because I was just so awestruck by all of the cool things that he had in his booth. But that's not the only really awesome thing that was there. There was an entire collection of Robot War robots. I tried to say Robot War Warriors and could not get it out. It was a bunch of Robot War robots who are also warriors, and they looked amazing. Now, unfortunately, none of them were really moving around and they didn't have any performances at this particular event. They had some smaller robots doing some battles, but none of the big bots were doing any battles, which was a little bit of a shame. I would have loved to see some of them in action, but the space probably didn't allow for it. And I get the impression from things that I've heard about this convention that SF, the city, sort of fought them on a bunch of things. So I do wonder, like, were they originally supposed to have like one battle maybe and didn't end up being able to because of the city? Who knows? That's entirely speculation. I have no idea, but it would have been cool to see some of them in action. One thing that was cool, despite not seeing any of them in action, was they actually had Grant Imahara's robot at the event, which was just really, really cool to see. He is such a legend. His passing was obviously way too soon. And just seeing his legacy carry on and the fact that they're still using his bot and bringing it around and touring with it is really awesome to me. I absolutely loved seeing it. There were just too many cool things to actually in full talk about. There was a piano that had RGB in it that looked amazing. So whenever people played it, it just lit up and it was so cool. There was a giant inflatable Among Us creature, which I posed next to because his butt was sticking out. I was like, hey, I can do that. I can do that with him. There was just so many fun things to look at. There was and I didn't actually see it in action, but there was a shrimp making fried, I think, rice, which was just, what? There was also a ton of just things set up that were taking photos interestingly or drawing you, and all of this stuff was amazing, but it's not the only thing that actually happened at this convention. There's even more for us to talk about, so let's continue. Hey guys, I just wanted to jump into the video real quick to remind you to subscribe and hit that bell icon for notifications so that you never miss any of the hobby content that we make here on the channel. I mentioned earlier that there were some smaller robots alongside the larger Robot Wars robots that were there. And I absolutely loved this event because they had it going throughout the entire day. They had this big plexiglass box to make sure everything was safe. And they put some robots in there, and the various YouTubers and content creators that were visiting were able to come in and they were able to do battle against each other and have war. And we got to witness a couple of the conflicts, and honestly, they were really, really fun. I did see separately footage of a flamethrower robot in use in this battle, and I unfortunately missed that one. None of the ones that I saw had a flamethrower on them, but they do exist and I will see them one day. The coolest thing though is we got to watch some robots do battle, but we also got to do battle with some robots ourselves. Chaos Cultist and I found a small booth that had a bunch of people around it because they were doing mini robot wars with perfectly safe, just very small scale robots. And we got to control them, and we had a 2 to 3 minute battle, I believe, and I kicked his butt. I absolutely kicked his butt. And the best part about it was my little robot, his weapon had on it a Lego leaf piece. Perfect. It was so perfect. I actually completely dominated him. My robot was larger, and I was able to get him into a corner, and I just kind of like beat him up. So I felt a little bad about it, but it was a huge amount of fun. And I hope that if I get to go again next year, that I get to do that again because I really want to. In fact, they were selling kits and I maybe should have bought one because building a little robot and then being able to have at-home battles against the Chaos Cultists could be very fun. I talked about robots way too much though. That wasn't the only thing that we got to see there. There was also some YouTuber races that happened, which was up near the front, and they were going around this giant blow up of the open source robot, which looked really fun. All of the content creators that were participating in the event also ended up participating in a couple of these races. And I think the one that we saw specifically had Backyard Scientist in it. I recognized him of all the people. They were all in costume and like riding these little RC cars, and it looked super cute, super fun. One day, maybe I'll be able to join them and I'll be able to ride on a race car around a track and try to win a race like that. It would be so cool. It would be so very cool. So we got to see that. There was also just a variety of other activities, like William Osmond had an egg drop, which unfortunately we did go to, but we couldn't hear anything. Like, you couldn't hear anything at a lot of the events, unfortunately. And I think that was entirely due to the space. We were at a pier. It was a curved building. I don't know if like the positioning of where they put their actual speakers was the best, and everything just got washed out. So we didn't stick around for the egg drop long because we couldn't hear anything, but what we did end up going to was the Arc Attack performance. They did this a couple of times throughout the day as well. And if you're not familiar with Arc Attack, they're an amazing band that uses Tesla coils to make music. And I've never seen them live before. I had seen a little bit of their work online, but I hadn't followed them much. So when they were here, we were like, well, we have to go to an Arc Attack performance. Neither of us have seen one in person. It was so cool. I just recently watched The Prestige for the first time, which also heavily involves Tesla. So Tesla's been on my brain. And the fact that we were able to see these Tesla coils in person and actually see and hear them was very cool, but also very terrifying. These things charging up was a just honestly horrifying noise to me, but I also really loved it. And the best performance was at the end. They actually had one of their artists come out in this like really cool suit with like this caged helmet and actually performed music with the Tesla coils. So they were in the center and they were directing some of the arcs, and it just looked so cool. But the coolest thing to me at this convention is actually what I'm going to talk about next. They had a freaking battleship at this convention. Okay, technically it's not a battleship. It is a Liberty ship, and it is the SS Jeremiah O'Brien. But regardless, it was super cool, and it was free for us to go on to. And if you wanted to, which I did not do this, but you could actually get a meal on the ship as well. That's actually where all of the food was located for the convention, if you didn't decide to leave the convention and just go up to Pier 39 and get food there, which is what Chaos Cultist and I did. But if you wanted to, you could eat on the ship. That's not what we did. What I did on the ship was so much cooler. One, I got to man the gun at the front of the ship and sit there and turn it and pretend like I was shooting something, anything, other battleships, Space Marines out of the sky, who knows, who cares? It was just really cool. But the best part was down below, they actually had a little mini museum about the ship itself and its place in World War II. And there is where I found the absolute coolest miniature display I have seen focusing on World War II. It was an entire 100 square foot miniature display of the D-Day invasion, and it looked amazing. Like, the detail work on it was stunning. I loved just like the scale of it. Plus there was a variety of other like miniatures and just other memorabilia and just artifacts from this ship's history that were on display. We also got to go into the engine room, which was also incredibly cool. Just basically the entire ship was really cool. You know me. I like military things. I like military things a lot, and I've actually not been on a military ship in a very long time. But I think the last time that I went on one was back when I was in Hawaii, and that has been ages ago. So getting to go on this ship was not only nostalgic for me from my youth, but also just incredibly relevant to my wargamer history. I loved staying on the ship, like looking at all the stuff that was in there. We spent a good portion of time just on the SS Jeremiah O'Brien, hanging out on the day that we went to the event. And I would not change it for anything because I just thought it was so cool. And I don't think that's going to be happening again. I genuinely do not think that Open Sauce Live is ever again going to have a battleship where you can get food. Now, I am not disappointed that I didn't get the food on there because honestly, I think it was roughly the same price that I paid when I went to just Pier 39, and I think I got more food for that. So definitely not complaining about that, but I am sad that they're not going to have a battleship probably at the next one. I just think it was a really cool option. I don't know how many of the other convention goers thought it was like the most badass thing there, but I certainly did. It totally fit for me, and I appreciate William Osmond for him renting it for the event. Thank you, sir. If it hasn't been obvious, I really loved Open Sauce Live. I think the entire event, even with some of its flaws, was really fun. And I really hope that I end up getting to go again next year. I think my favorite thing was probably the Liberty ship, just because it was really unexpected and really fit my vibe very well. And I don't expect it to be there next year. So I think in that case, my next favorite thing was actually the Arctech performance. I just thought that was really cool. I've never seen Tesla coils in real life, as I mentioned, and getting to see them in person was just amazing. I think my least favorite thing was just the audio problems and not being able to get to the main stage. I did wish that I could have gone to some of those main stage events. There was one panel on the first day in particular that had Evan and Caitlin and Nerdforge, as well as I think one other group. It was basically their art panel. And I wanted to see that one because I really like Nerdforge and their content, and I really like Evan and Caitlin and their content, but it was impossible to get close enough to the stage to hear anything. And so that was maybe my least favorite element of the convention, but overall, this thing was great. I hope that it's successful next year. I know that they've already sold some tickets for next year without even knowing where it's going to be yet, because it is definitely not going to be in SF. They haven't said that officially, but I guarantee you it is not going to be there. The city is just too problematic for conventions, and no one wants to have events here. So maybe they'll end up in Las Vegas, maybe they'll end up in LA, maybe they'll be in San Jose, who knows? But regardless, I do hope that I end up being able to go next year, because that way I could share that with you again and just see how it's changed. I rarely get to go to conventions when they have their first years. In fact, I don't know if I've ever gone to a convention that has had its first year outside of like one college convention that was actually put on by myself and the Chaos Cultist. So that doesn't really count. So this is my first time, and I thought it was amazing. I think they did an exceptional job. William, I think you did a great job with this convention. Good luck to you again next year, sir. Good luck to you with your new baby as well. And that, I think, is going to be it from me on my time at Open Sauce Live 2023. Do let me know down in the comments which part of Open Sauce Live you would have wanted to see most. Do you hope that I go next year? Let me know down in the comments. And before I head out, I do want to give a huge thank you to my patrons for making it so content like this can continue to happen. Without your guys' support, we would not be doing this, so thank you very, very much. And until next time, I'll see you later. I've been Angela, and have a wonderful hobby night.